is item N2, which is in the matter of continued discussion regarding the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement, the Klamath hydroelectric agreement, and the Board of County Commissioners in their efforts to receive and understand comments from the public and engage in discussions about further continuance and or support of the KBRA agreements. Are there items of note that you would like to be on the record with?
Well, I guess I can start the discussion here. This has been a very contentious issue throughout our community for a long, long time. It's divided our community, and it's pitted friend against friend, family member against family member, neighbor against neighbor, irrigator against irrigator, tribal interests against other people, but yet on the other side of this, there's been a lot of alliances made through this process, and I think it's been made called historic, and I agree with that. I think there's been some alliances made here that people would have never, ever in their wildest dreams thought would have been possible. And I think that shows the resolve of the Klamath Basin citizens, the irrigators, the tribal people. They've all worked together to try to make something work. We've been tasked with revisiting this issue here as a Board of Commissioners, a new Board of Commissioners. And we had tons of emails and things to look over here in the last 2 weeks. I don't know what the number actually ended up being, but there was a very substantial number. And what I was looking personally was new information, new perspectives, new data. And there was a little bit of new data came in. A lot of the things were what you would expect we've seen over and over again. No great gigantic surprises other than some of the scientists that have jumped on board with this giving their opinions. They were very one-sided on the emails that we've received here in the last 2 weeks. I think the science or lack of science has been expounded upon a great deal. The validity of the science has been under scrutiny in many different areas, whether it's from the Paul Hauser mess that the Department of Interior has going forward, or the last 7 scientists that have been reassigned or possibly reassigned for their issues here. There is a lot of information that just doesn't seem to match with the other group of information. And the citizens, I think, have felt disconnected to a great extent and not having a voice in what goes on here. I agree with that to a point, but yet I'm going to even disagree somewhat with people that have supported myself in my efforts, because I think the citizens have had a great impact on what goes on here. Anybody that discounts the elections that have happened in the last, since 2010, you can't deny the public input there. You just can't deny that. And that weighs very heavily on a decision that I, as an elected official, has to weigh. And I do the best I can to put my personal opinions aside. I will be criticized, I'm sure, no matter what I say from here. And that comes with a job. So I don't shirk that responsibility. I have my very strong opinions, but I also look at the facts. I look at the people and the comments that I have had, people that have come in and talked to me personally, phone calls, emails, all the meetings I've gone to over the years. This is not a hasty decision that's being made. And I will disagree with anybody that says that this was a predetermined decision. I am human just like anybody else. And I have my thought processes, but I am open to anything that's been out there. And I've read every one of the emails. I've gone back through, I wouldn't even know how many pounds of information that I've gathered over the years. And some of the emails that we got in the last 2 weeks, I've gone over as many as 4 times, reading them over again, looking at the data that's been presented, and weighing that to the best of my ability to what we need to do here. I think, again, the alliances that have been made, I hope are there to stay. This is a very historic part of this process. If 10 years ago somebody would say these alliances would be made, they would have been laughed out of the room. And that's undeniable. And that is a great positive thing that the Klamath Basin has working for it. I have some other things I'd like to say, but I'm going to defer to other commissioners to further this discussion, and I'll jump back in again.
I wanted to start out with asking some questions. And my first question is, this board, this current county board of county commissioners, bound by the decision of the previous board? I think that is some issues that has come up in the past, and I'd like to address this. The amendment says each signatory to this First Amendment certifies that he or she is authorized to execute this First Amendment and to legally bind the party that he or she represents. Now, whether you can do that or not is the question. So I think case law in the state of Oregon will establish that boards of county commissioners may not take actions that impair the core legislative powers of their successors in office. The law draws a distinction between core legislative powers of a legislative body and those powers that are more properly described as administrative or proprietary, like a contract for your janitor. Legislative bodies may not contractually bind their successors with regard to the former, which is legislative. Now, this is a policy and legislative action. It is not an administrative rule or a contract that we have signed. So can the previous board, by signing this, hold this board to that contract? And I think case law shows that this board, if it decides to change its position on this agreement, that the previous signers to it does not bind this board. Now, to further that, I think that probably follows any board that is a signer on this agreement, but each board that is a signer on this agreement has to make that determination. But as it pertains to this board, there is not an agreement that they can bind us with. So we can change our thinking in regards to that. Now, the second question that I'd like to address, and then I got quite a few questions that I'd like to address, but I'll let the other commissioners do a little talking in regards to this, and it's a matter of who has the rights in this agreement, and whether or not the county has any rights that it is trying to defend in regards to signing this agreement. The tribes have rights. The people that have water rights have rights. PP&L has rights. They own the dams. The landowners affected by the agreements have rights. But does the county have rights? In this agreement, or in any agreement, or just in fact, does the county have any rights in any of it? And the county really has no rights, has no water rights, has no really interest in this agreement at all. Does the county care if the dams are removed? County really don't care, because the only right that they have in regards to the dam is whether or not it's an assessment on this property tax. As soon as the county assesses that dam for its property rights, then the county has a right to that tax. But does it have any right or any care whether or not the dams are removed? I say that the county really don't care. The county does not care if people lose value of their land. The county as an entity has no feelings one way or the other. And I represent the county. I'm trying to keep myself out of this and represent how the county as an entity looks at this. So, does the county care if some private owner of a building here in the county or in the city where the county collects property taxes from, does the county care if that private company or individual tears down their house? No, county don't care. It only cares about the property tax that it might levy on that piece of property. People tear down things all the time. County loses property taxes and gains property taxes. Property goes up and down. Does the county care about that? Only in the amount of money that they're going to collect. So if the dams are out, county don't care. County might be a little disturbed about the fact that it might lose a certain amount of property tax, but there might be something in it come in and take the place of that. In regards to the rights of the people, the rights are not given to any of the people by the county. The rights to the tribe, the rights the tribe has, are administered by the federal government. County has no connection with that whatsoever. So does the county care? Well, as an entity, no. Does not care about the rights of the tribe, doesn't care about the rights of the property owners, does not care about the loss of land value or anything. It cares about the property tax on that. But the county, as an entity, doesn't really care if there's even any people in this county. If we're mandated for certain things, if our population reduced to 1 person, guess what we would have? We'd have a jail because we're mandated for that. We'd have county roads, and we'd have a few other things until the money ran out. But the county, as an entity, really has no rights in this argument. And I'll end it there and listen to the other commissioners, see what they have to say.
I guess it's good to have public meeting because you find out what's going on inside of someone else's head. And you raise several interesting points that we have had discussions about, and I think the danger of an item, for example, that you just voiced is, as leaders in the county, we're more than just the guys who are counting pennies in the back room. And so as leaders in the county, we should care whether people keep their homes. I'm not saying we care monetarily, but we care with our human heart, our dignity, our soul. We care about the growth and welfare of people in this community. And I wouldn't advocate for using tax dollars to attract people to the community or to keep people in the community like we currently see that kind of policy happening, where now this care has actually turned into a financial transaction. The financial transaction becomes a very interesting game because your solar array, for example, can only survive as long as the subsidy dollars come in, as long as you get the rates that you've negotiated through legislative power. Your solar array actually provides benefit to your home. It doesn't provide benefit to anybody else, but their tax dollars, their ratepayer dollars are the dollars that are subsidizing your endeavor. So that's why I draw the line between utilizing tax funding and whether or not we as individuals actually care. I have problems with the KBRA, and they actually haven't changed. I put together a slideshow that it will show up over here on the screen. Will it show up on the screen? And I just wanted to think through some of the things that are going on with the KBRA that bother me. These are my main concerns, much like what I just described with regard to a solar array and renewable energy installation. The benefits that are conferred on the stakeholders actually come from ratepayers and taxpayers. Those benefits are not necessarily negotiated amongst the stakeholders. Because they're not negotiated amongst the stakeholders, it looks like it's win-win-win for everybody involved, and actually somebody is going to foot the bill. If there's $1 billion required to remove the dams, that $1 billion will come from somewhere. Even if it's only $750 million, that $750 million will come from somewhere. And so at some point, what this means is ratepayers and taxpayers should be viewed appropriately as stakeholders. They have a stake in this discussion, and it's perfectly appropriate to include them. In grade school, you probably learned that the Earth was this beautiful blue marble, 75% water, and you know, that's a little bit of a statistic that gets misquoted. The surface is 75% water, but the Earth itself is really more like a marble with a hard-shelled, translucent lower part. The Earth, if you thought of it as a marble, it actually is marble. It's solid rock, except for those little blue dots there. The first one that I want you to pay attention to is water is only 0.07% by mass and 0.04% by volume of planet Earth. The large bubble that you see over the western United States is about the size of all water on the planet. That includes all oceans, all glaciers, all ice caps, all lakes, rivers, all groundwater inside the Earth, and water in the atmosphere. That bubble there, a large bubble over the western United States, is about somewhere 680 miles in diameter. You'll see another bubble in this picture. It's a little bit smaller bubble, and it's kind of hanging out over Kentucky. That medium bubble is fresh water on the planet. The fresh water on the planet includes groundwater, lakes, rivers, and even swamps. We'll call it fresh just for namesake. It's not saline water. If you look just below that little middle bubble, you'll see a teeny blue dot. It's really hard to see because it's so stinking small. That blue dot is the fresh surface water bubble. That fresh surface water bubble is, you know, an enormous bubble. When it comes to discussing it in human terms, it's about 1/3 of 1 billion gallons per individual living on planet Earth. That's a lot of showers. 1/3 of 1 billion gallons per individual. The point is, though, water will be an extremely important resource for us to manage. And if we do not manage the fresh water that we have on planet Earth, we will all be in trouble. My perspective has always been that the KBRA cannot achieve its goals of sustainable water without water storage being a focal point. If we can store water, we'll add just marginally to that freshwater bubble, but that will produce more supply. More supply will be more resources available both for fish, for farmers, for agriculture, for fisheries. There would simply be more of this precious resource. If we just crank it open and let that spill into the salty Pacific, we haven't really helped ourselves. So this is an important perspective in terms of the economic perspective of what does the KBRA do, how does it do it, and who benefits from that. The solution to this is just a proper preservation of our resources. I think everybody at the table, all of the existing stakeholders, are arguing for this. The trouble is, because ratepayers and taxpayers haven't been included, there's proper preservation of the natural resource, but not proper preservation of the individual wallet. I think that's a mistake. I think we should let the private economy manage how these things flow together. And I would suspect that part of the issue would be focusing on water storage to create more resources, more precious water storage for Klamath County. The end, what I'd like to see is more water. I'd like to see renewable energy coming out of dams and reservoirs and turbines within the river habitat. The river habitat would certainly prosper if we would do much like the Fish Umpqua story that shows up in last month's Pacific Power magazine, where they installed fish ladders that are providing great efforts in terms of making a success out of fish passage both upstream and downstream. And my hope is that we can build a future by getting everybody together, including all the existing stakeholders who want to take part in this, as well as taxpayers and ratepayers. And I actually agree with Jim that the entire perspective of the county having a distinct interest is a false notion. The county does not have a distinct interest in the water itself. The water belongs to the state of Oregon, to the users of those water via their water rights, and those water rights should be, actually are going to be enforced and maintained. So that's my perspective on what it looks like to think about water and to think about saving water, not flushing it down the stream. And I say flushing it down the stream may actually cause heads to shake. I'm using that figuratively based on this bubble we saw several slides back that shows this tiny freshwater bubble is extremely small compared to the amount of water that's on planet Earth. We should use it wisely. Thank you.
No, I agree with everything that's been said here so far. This is a conversation that should have happened quite some time back, I think. I think previous county commissioner boards have stifled discussion. I do say, and we'll give credit to the former Board of Commissioners a couple of years back. They asked to be a facilitator in getting the local parties together to discuss these things in just this kind of a setting. Unfortunately, many of the parties wouldn't come to the table. The Upper Basin folks were willing to come to the table. For whatever reason, the Klamath Tribe and the project irrigators, the Lower Basin, did not want to participate. That was disheartening to me. I thought we could have avoided a lot of problems and gained a lot better foothold on making a solution that would work if that had happened back a couple of years ago. As Dennis said, the ratepayers and the taxpayers have been left out of this equation. The citizens of Klamath County were indeed represented by a county commissioner at the table. I will take issue somewhat with that. I participated in some of those meetings, many of those meetings, and I don't feel that the citizens of Klamath County as a whole were represented in a very fair manner. They were discounted at numerous times, and that was very disheartening. That's probably one of the things that got me started in more of this direction where I am today, because of that example that I saw there in a negative light. One of the biggest concerns from some people, and a very valid argument, if I can't endorse the KBRA and dam removal, what is, they call it Plan B? Well, you know, something that came to my mind here about a month ago. We took a ride on a Chinook helicopter as going out to see a site up in eastern Oregon. And I was looking at that Chinook helicopter, and I asked one of the, I think it was a crew chief on it, and I asked him, I said, this is an old helicopter. How many original parts are on this helicopter? And he kind of looked around and looked at it, and I said, maybe the tires? And he kind of laughed, and he said, you're not too far off. The KBRA and dam removal, they've been a very noble effort to get parties together, groundbreaking, but that doesn't mean that has to stop there. Just like that Chinook helicopter, you can build something from the parts and pieces of the first effort. It doesn't have to go down the drain completely. I believe that this is a noble effort, but it didn't deliver what it needed to deliver. From the very beginning, from an irrigator perspective, It had three goals that it needed to address. That's affordable power for irrigators, reliable water deliveries, and protection from the ESA and the biological opinions. Those three items were not achieved in the current form of this KBRA and dam removal. Dam removal being put in, I think, was a very big mistake. I voiced that concern at the KBRA meetings in Sacramento, and I was told this was the only option that was going to be on the table, to sit down and basically shut up. I was very disheartened there at that kind of an attitude, because there was no discussion about alternatives. Absolutely none. None were allowed throughout the process that I participated in. I would oftentimes bring up alternatives and were shut down completely. Off-stream storage that Dennis brought up. I brought that up numerous times, and so did our county commissioner, John Elliott. Give him credit for that. That was shot down completely. Off-stream storage was considered to be, the only option was wetlands. Wetlands are great. They recharge the aquifers. They do a lot of good things, but they also consume almost 4 times as much water as irrigated agriculture. So every acre of wetlands that you produce, or what some people say put back into existence, puts another demand on the very small bubble that you saw on that screen. So how is that sustainable? It's not. There has to be a sacrifice for that to work. And the sacrifice that was given up in those closed-door meetings was downsizing irrigated agriculture in the upper basin and the lower basin on a permanent basis. That was very disheartening. I believe in compromise. I truly, truly do. I didn't feel that the compromise was balanced there at all. I feel that the folks here in this basin could come up with a much better solution than what we have on the table right now. I think that's been proven in a couple of different instances in the past. 2005, there was a agreement made, no dotting the I's, crossing the T's, but the philosophy and the ideas were incorporated into an agreement that was signed in Greg Walden's office with the present tribal chairman at the time and the Upper Basin irrigators. That didn't last very long. The federal government decided that that wasn't in their best interests for their direction, and I could expound on that a lot, because that really opened my eyes to how, I will call it, corrupt our federal government is in trying to gain control of our natural resources. And that was absolutely appalling to me, when you actually see our federal government orchestrating things to take our natural resources away from us. They don't stop with timber. They don't stop with even our water. They will never stop, it seems like, and they need to get the message from our citizens that that's not an agreeable direction to go. Again, I think parts and pieces of the KBRA needs to be integrated back into something that's really going to work. One of the arguments that has been put out there oftentimes is we need to have local control. We need to have local developed solutions. Well, the KBRA is not a locally developed program. It was developed by a room full of sometimes as many as 50 attorneys, mostly from the federal and state government. I've been at those meetings. I counted them up. I kept a tally a couple of times and counted who they represented. They didn't represent us. They did not represent the citizens of Klamath County. And that's just a simple numbers game that you can't hardly dispute. I mean, you can disagree with them, yes, but I made the counts in some of those meetings, and we were so far outnumbered that it was very laughable. And I don't say that very lightly, because I didn't laugh in those meetings very often. There are many alternatives that were totally discounted. Dennis brought up the off-stream storage, and it needs to be deep, cold off-stream storage to help fish, to help the irrigators for an offset when times are bad. Affordable power can be achieved in other methods, whether it's a PUD, taking control of the dams, going that direction. And there are efforts in that process already in Oregon and in California, both. Oregon legislature needs to readdress the renewable portfolio requirements for Pacific Core. Right now, dams at a certain age are not considered renewable. And even if Pacific Corp goes back and spends $450 million to upgrade them, they will still not be considered renewable. That's insane. If they're up to standards, they should be considered renewable. Pacific Corp would probably, I can't speak for Dean Brockbank, but my guess would be they would be more inclined to keep those dams in place and keep generating power with new upgrades in their turbines and the fish bypass, whatever is required. One of the things that nobody very often talks about is if they take the 4 dams out, those fish are still going to have to be trucked. They're still going to have to be trucked. Within this program, they can't survive that 22 river miles, I believe it is, from Keno Dam up into the lake. They can't survive. So it's already in that the KBRA and dam removal that the fish will be trucked anyway. So the easy solution, I'm a nuts and bolts kind of person, always have been, always will be. The dams come out, Iron Gate will go, and that fish hatchery will go along with it. They say they'll run that fish hatchery for 8 more years, but it's going to be pretty tough to do that with no water supply. And the hatchery is right in line with the original river channel of the Klamath River. First high water comes along, we'll take whatever's left of the hatchery out. So the solution there would be to gather the fish at Iron Gate and truck them up to the lake. And if they survive there, then everybody should be happy with that. It's a much easier solution, much cheaper solution. It's a nuts and bolts, common sense kind of solution. So anyway, I'll defer again to one of the other commissioners here that wants to jump in on this.
I just wanted to mention a couple, 3 emails that we received. This one from Chris Mowdrey, he said, we realistically cannot change the ESA or provide relief from state water rights issues. And he's for the agreement, and I agree with him. We realistically can't change that. And Sally Wells said, you must put the county's interest above the ideology or party. And I wanted to say to Sally that I am trying to take my interest out of it and to look at it like a non-feeling entity, which is the county. Take my personal beliefs out of it. John Walker says it does not cost the Klamath County anything to stay in the KBRA, but is that true? We have certain obligations if you want to decide to stay in the agreement, and how will that affect us? Now, there's been some calculations by people that we will spend the whole $3.2 million that we're supposed to receive in 2016 that is given to the Klamath County to help alleviate the loss of property taxes. It's a one-time payment, but we would be losing property taxes from the dam and from the loss of agricultural land from now on, because the dam won't be rebuilt. So that's hard to calculate, but it's going to keep going. So you know, I agree with the statement by Chris, and I agreed with an awful lot of the people that wanted to leave the dam, take the dams out and sign on to the agreement. We got an awful lot of people that wanted the county to stay in the agreement. And they had some good rational thinking along that line. But I wanted to answer another question, and that is, what is the economic impact to Klamath County? Now, it's economic impact not related necessarily to Klamath County as an entity, except for the property taxes. But what is that? Now I'm not going to come up with my own information. I'm going to take it from the information on the dam removal. If you take just Klamath County, who I am representing and care about, I've tried to break it down to how much Klamath County would be suffering from it. It's a little bit hard because the loss of hydropower alone is $1,320 million over 50 years. This is based on a 50-year estimate. So a certain amount of that, maybe you could attribute that to a loss in Klamath County. But if we go for irrigated agriculture, they estimate that to be an increase in 50 years of $29 million. Refuge recreation, an increase of a little over $4 million. Whitewater rafting, boating, is going to be a $6 million loss. Reservoir recreation over the 50 years is a $35 million loss. And then those reservoirs, if you count the ones where the dam is going to be taken out, really aren't affecting Klamath County. But if you take non-use values in the whole area, California and Oregon, in the 12 county represented area, you have an increase of total economic value of about $217 million over the period of 50 years. Now, to divide that up exactly how much Klamath County is losing or gaining is pretty hard to do. Most of the economic value is actually out of the counties, all 12 counties, and especially out of ours. The rest of Oregon and California for total non-use and economic value is about $11 billion out of our area, not in our area. And then they calculate the rest of the U.S., just because we're doing this agreement, the total non-use value is $13 billion, $487 million. So if you add this all up, how much in Klamath County are we losing or gaining? It's not very much gain and it's not very much loss. I mean, this calculation is pretty much has to do with outside our county. Now, if you take, let's take jobs. Where's the jobs? Has anybody ever looked at page 367 of this same book? What happens to the jobs? If we decommission the dams, we have one dam in Klamath County, and I just divided it by 4. That gives us 350 jobs that they estimate over a period of a few months. Operation and management over 50 years of operating the dams is a loss of 600. The mitigation for the time period between 2018 and 2025 is a gain of 105 jobs. But then you go down through commercial fishing, which is mostly in the ocean. They're all a gain of jobs, but it reflects nothing on Klamath County. Klamath County, Siskiyou County, California, for reservoir recreation, might lose 100 jobs over the 50 years. Klamath and Jackson County, Humboldt and Siskiyou County is going to lose 150 jobs from whitewater rafting. So I could keep going, but I did some calculations and tried to figure out what economic impact of jobs is actually going to gain in Klamath County. And I came out that we are going to actually gain 11 jobs over the first 50 years. Most of that is going to be because of the dam removal. Now, if you go past that 50 years, it actually goes into a negative number. So some calculations I did in regards to jobs, because we see signs all over that says KBRA equals jobs. It does maybe, but for Klamath County, actually it's just about a wash. And then it's going to be a loss somewhere down the line when you start calculating the loss of the farming, the land that you're going to idle. So you could, and I figured in the amount of jobs that you are going to gain. That's in the equation from drought-given years that you might get water to farm with. So those are calculations right out of the book for dam removal. So anybody can do that calculation, but you might come up with something that I did, but I tried to be fair for Klamath County. So Klamath County cares about what? Cares about the money. And we get the $3.2 million from lottery funds. We have to try to get that we have to get $500,000 to put into the program from economic development, and hopefully if this goes forward, that there's some money there. So there's a lot of things that have to be voted on by other people besides Klamath County in regards to money. So, but there's one thing that we haven't touched on, and that is what happens if somebody files a lawsuit because of the removal of the dams goes bad. Now, Klamath County, as a signatory to this, Klamath County agrees not to file a claim in federal or state court or before any administrative agency against the state of Oregon, state of California, any state agency, department, division, or subdivision thereof, or the United States, arising from any decrease in property tax revenue or alleged business or economic losses, including property values due to facilities removal. Okay, that's what it says about us in have the ability to file suit against somebody else. But what happens, now there's people that signed on to this agreement that did not give those rights up. And I believe that Klamath County should, if they wanted to remain a member of this agreement, that I would not want to give up any of my rights to any ability to not bring suit against somebody that's damaged the county. So I am worried, though, about some other entity because of a problem with this agreement goes bad, that Klamath County, as a signatory to this, could be sued. So that puts us in a bad position for the taxpayers of Klamath County and the ability to back that suit up. And that suit, if the dam removal goes bad, there's probably people downstream that already has the paperwork filled out. And I don't want Klamath County to be sued as a signatory to this agreement and have the liability that we might suffer because of it.
Jim, I'll add to that. When thinking about the monetary value, the potential liability, the potential risk, these items are items that really need to be seriously addressed. The federal government is basically on the docket for paying for these things, i.e. the ratepayers and taxpayers specifically. In Oregon, ratepayers are currently contributing to a fund for dam removal. In California, there's supposed to be a bond measure for dam removal, and there's no legislation in the wings or whatnot. That means Oregon and the federal government are going to foot the bill. It's an interesting thing to dream about. We hear of the $16 trillion debt at the federal level. In other words, we spend more than we actually have. We have not saved that capital. We have not saved that investment resource. We don't have it to invest, or where will we get the money? We will get the money for today's benefits from either tomorrow's generation or from China. Take your pick. Your kids will pay for it, or China will pay for it, because we actually don't have it. In August of 2012, you can look this up on Bloomberg, they published an article that said, the headline was quite attractive. It was blink. The federal budget deficit is actually $222 trillion. Now, when you try and get a handle on that, it's as big as that little bubble that I was trying to show you that's 680 miles in diameter for the amount of water on planet Earth. $222 trillion represents the unfunded actuarially accrued liabilities for the United States of America, projected out for a 75-year actuarially justified amount for all of their pension and retirement. $222 trillion. It went up by $21 trillion in 1 year, in the year 2011. These numbers are unfathomable. Jump onto Bloomberg and look for the article. It will blow your mind to see what's happened to the unfunded actuarially accrued liabilities for the federal government in the past 5 years. And we're now starting to get into a real weird zone where we are pretending that our financial perspective doesn't matter. It'll all just work out. I think it's time we had enough seriousness to focus on the finances, to wonder questions about, are these numbers realistic? Are they outlandish? Are they appropriate? Can they be justified? It's hard enough to go out 5 years or 10 years. I'm not sure how in the world you get out 75 years. But nevertheless, that comes from the Congressional Budget Office. If anybody's got a handle on how these things should work, they should have a handle on it. So I think the current agenda, which is an attempt, but an ill-fated attempt, because it leaves managing these dams and the water and the future for the fish and the habitat to political whim. If there's political momentum, it will happen. If there's not political momentum, or if in 4 years that momentum changes, or if in 6 years something else occurs, it's now a topsy-turvy roller coaster of an economic environment. It would be far better for Klamath County to be engaged in something where real value for real dollars was actually achieved. If there's real value to it, it has value in the marketplace. One thing that we know about real value comes from cheap energy. With inexpensive energy, you can actually move mountains. With expensive energy, you won't bother. The point is, hydro is the cheapest source of energy that we have. Aside from geothermal, which comes close, coal, which is a very good energy source, natural gas, solar and wind energy, although we call them renewable, they are very, very expensive. And so at some point, what we're doing is we're spending very expensive current savings or dollars or borrowed dollars to get a small spoonful of energy out of the renewable resources that are in the market today. That technology will change, but it's not changing quite as fast as the news media would have you believe. For those of you who may not be familiar, I have personally lived off the grid for nearly 18 years. And I've had a solar array, and that's how we toast bread in the morning, right? Everything comes from the sunshine. Believe it or not, for all of my infrastructure, for all of my equipment and gear, the same thing that happens at my house, I'm guessing, maybe it's a wild guess, happens at the Lakeview site and would happen at the Bly site. The sun will go down every night. All of your capital, all of your equipment, all of your financial investment for generating power will go idle for 16 hours out of the day. Actually, at our longitude, latitude, the solar day is only 5 hours, 4.5 in the winter, 5.5 in the summer. Average that to 5 hours of a solar day here in the Pacific Northwest. If I were going to invest in solar energy, I would do it in Arizona or New Mexico, Southern California. I would not do it in the Northwest. The reason men and women are anxious to invest in the Northwest is through legislative policy. The Oregon State Legislature has a power portfolio model that was put in place in 2007. And renewable energy is a requirement, and so you can spend any amount of money to keep yourself from falling afoul of the law. This is a terrible market to be in, where you're busy applying and spending resources and money and taxpayer and ratepayer dollars simply to comply with legislation that is, quite frankly, the whim of the current legislation. If it changes next year, or in 3 years, or in 5 years, what will that investment look like? When Pacific Power started their schedule for a allowing solar power to come into the system. They did it for 1 year under PUC 36 revision -1 was nearly 55 cents a kilowatt. The following year, it dropped to 44 cents a kilowatt, then to 34 cents a kilowatt. Today, it's much lower, much closer to 9 cents additional per kilowatt generated. But my point simply is, this is a false economy. It's not a true economy based on the economics of scale and the value produced for Klamath County. So the item, I'm simply following on to the item that Jim was highlighting in terms of, gee, what will this cost Klamath County? How much will it cost us? And is this an appropriate place for us to be as a community?
I'd like to address some of his comments on the economic impacts here. And this is kind of the interesting part of this process here. With public meeting laws, the three of us cannot, outside of a meeting like this, discuss what we're going to talk about or decide. So this is all new information. I wasn't expecting a bubble presentation and some of these things. So we're not, these things weren't discussed in private, and we're having a great discussion here. So Jim had mentioned that he didn't know exactly what the economic impacts were. We do have some of those numbers, came from the assessor's office. The $3.2 million that goes to Klamath County from lottery funds is an economic plus for Klamath County. The negative side of that, if you add up dam removal, the one dam is in Klamath County, J.C. Boyle. Last year they paid Klamath County $505,000 approximately tax revenue to Klamath County. Also, under the present agreements, Keno Dam will be deeded over to the federal government. We'll lose that tax revenue on a permanent basis also. Downsizing of the upper and lower basin irrigated agricultural lands is another economic loss to Klamath County, approximately $100,000 there. Loss of timber, or the tax revenue from the land up on 97, that's another economic loss to Klamath County. The upgrades that I believe, and rough calculations on the J.C. Boyle Dam, is another huge loss of potential economic benefits to Klamath County. This is a 50-year contract where they calculated out we get that $3.2 million, but on an annual basis, as of today, not necessarily down the road, because the Pacific Corp will depreciate out some of those infrastructures, but right now it's about $1.2 million worth of tax loss on an annual basis. And you calculate that over a 50-year period, it's going to, $3.2 million doesn't even think about touching that, not even close. And then what do you have to give up to get that, even that $3.2 million? It's a terrible price to pay. Staying in the negotiations, it sounds pretty good to some people. Myself personally, over the process of the number of years I've been involved in this, all I've seen it do in the last part here is really continue to divide our community. These agreements have not put our community together. It's got a good stakeholder group that's talking. Yes, it has done that. But our community is so divided, it's tearing us apart. And my feeling is that the faster this present direction stops and we can get back to the table with those good relationships that have been formed over the years and add ratepayers, taxpayers, a true representation of the upper basin irrigators, get those back together, and to really get a solution that will be truly motivated and driven locally here by the Klamath tribes, by the irrigators, by the citizens of Klamath County. That's where I feel we need to, and I think it will, bring the community back together. And that's my ultimate goal here, is to bring the community back together with a solution that is truly generated locally, not by the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., or even Salem or Sacramento, but here in our local communities. That's where the solution has to be, is right here locally. Unfortunately, the KBRA and dam removal has done the opposite. It's torn us apart.